I'll just say a few opening remarks and then turn it over to my friend, Premier Scott Moe, and thank him for also hosting us on the Saskatchewan side of Lloydminster. I think when we do the Lloydminster Summit #2, we might try to find a location on the Alberta side just to even her up. But thank you for joining us here. The city is a reminder of our shared history and the bonds between our two provinces. 120 years ago on this same day, our provinces were created. We have strong separate identity, but a great deal of commonality. And in fact, we talked a lot about our commonality today. We identified, of course, 9 specific changes that Prime Minister Mark Carney needs to make in order to meet his stated goal of making Canada's economy the strongest in the G7. I have mentioned those several times, but I'll mention them again. Guaranteeing full access to oil and gas corridors, northeast and west, repealing Bill C-69, lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast, eliminating the oil and gas emissions cap, scrapping the so-called clean electricity regs, the net zero power regs, ending the designation of plastics as toxic, abandoning the net zero car mandate, and returning oversight of the industrial carbon tax to the provinces, as well as halting the federal censorship of energy companies. And I think we're here today as a united caucus because we've decided that enough is enough. Development of provincial resources is provincial responsibility, and that includes the development of our transmission and electricity grids. And if we can unite in a common purpose, we can ensure that the rest of Canada hears our voices, that Ottawa should stop interfering, because together we believe Alberta and Saskatchewan have an opportunity to speak with one voice to Ottawa, outlining a vision for our country. And we can call for a country that works for all of us. So with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to Premier Moe.
And I would just reiterate all that Premier Smith has said, and said this was a great opportunity for us to bring our caucuses together to discuss the very close alignment that we have in our ambitions to advocate and to represent abroad in markets of interest to both of our provinces and to our nation. And second is to work together and mutually on working alongside what would hopefully be the federal government as well in really correcting some of the regulatory space that we have in this nation when it comes to the development of our natural resources and ultimately getting those resources to the world. The very fact that Bill C-5 has been introduced, which is a bill to legislate around the current regulatory process that we have, I think is an admission that this hard work does have to happen. And so we've been supportive of us prioritizing projects in the short term, which is really a stopgap to fixing the entirety of the regulatory process that we have in Canada so that all projects can move forward. In Saskatchewan, we don't have 1 or 2 or 3 projects that are a priority. We have literally in excess of 100 projects that are a priority for us to continue to be a wealth creator, not only in communities across Saskatchewan, but be a contributing province into a strong, growing nation of Canada. Today was also an opportunity for us, I think, as caucuses from Saskatchewan and Alberta, to discuss some of the differences in that alignment as well. And I had said in Calgary earlier this week, and I'll provide one example, where a port-to-port corridor that I believe should be of the highest priority in the nation of Canada. A port-to-port corridor in Western Canada connecting one of those northwestern Pacific ports to the Hudson Bay would provide the opportunity for us to have access to Asian and European markets for years into the future, for generations into the future. And this is really, I think, a generational strategic project that would provide the opportunity to create wealth, not just in Western Canada, but for all Canadians for literally decades, if not centuries into the future. Yep. That opportunity has to be for all products. All products, whether it be hydroelectricity, whether it be expanding our rail access into places like Port Prince Rupert, but it also has to provide the access for the oil and gas industry so that we can expand one of the cleanest and most sustainable oil and gas industries in the world. Some will say in Saskatchewan's case, and this was part of our discussion, if that access is created, it is possible there may not even be Saskatchewan barrels of oil in that particular pipeline that might find its way to the northwest coast. However, the benefit to Saskatchewan Saskatchewan People and Industries is very direct, and it's tremendous. In the case of immediately, the differential is going to shrink, and Saskatchewan is going to receive a higher price per barrel of oil on every barrel of oil that we ship. Second, it would free up rail capacity for other products like agri-food products, of which we share, potash, which comes from Saskatchewan, and port capacity for those products as well. Third, it would open up the potential for additional egress capacity into the United States, where largely the Saskatchewan barrels of oil do find their home and do find a sale. So more barrels of oil from Saskatchewan, some of the most sustainable oil of its kind in the world, could find its way to the U.S. at a higher price because of the diminished basis due to this nation-building infrastructure that in turn would allow a place like Alberta to literally, as the theme of the conference was earlier this week, dare to double their production of some of the, again, most sustainable product that you can find on Earth of that particular kind of product. And so what a great day, I think, and a great event we had here today, where we're able to bring our respective caucuses together to discuss, where we align, why we align, and why the emphasis of that alignment might be slightly different, but ultimately to have a better understanding of, what is happening in both of our provinces and where our similarities are and where our opportunities to work together are. So thank you, Premier Smith, for bringing the entirety of your caucus one block into Saskatchewan here in Lloydminster, our shared border city.
It was an amazing day.
Thank you, Premiers. We'll now go into questions. We have a nice spread of Alberta and Saskatchewan reporters here in the room. We're going to start off at the mic here. We'll take one question, one follow-up, and then we're going to make our way to the phones, and we'll get to as many as we can. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Jerry Lampow, 106.1 in Lloydminster, and welcome to the Premiers and Caucus. Nice to have you all in the border city once again. Question for you all firstly, and then there will be a follow-up. How does your advocacy recognize the fact that in the last 20 years' history in Canada, the only two major pipelines that have been built happened under the watch of the Liberals, and you're talking the TMX and I'm hearing that the one in Kitimat might be shipping gas as this weekend. How does your advocacy recognize the fact that in the last 20 years in Canada's history, that the only two pipelines that have been built happened under the Liberal watch?
Well, I would say that there are a number of different pipelines who've done expansions along existing rights of way, who've done compression, who have figured out a way with the limitations that we've had to increase egress. That's why we're up to about 4.2 million barrels a day right now out of Alberta. I look at the Trans Mountain pipeline. If we have to build another pipeline with federal taxpayer dollars, that would be a failure of the process. The federal government simply cannot put so many barriers in the way that all the private sector proponents are scared out of the realm, and then the only way for them to come in is to build at 6 times the original cost. That shouldn't be the only way things get built in this country. And if you talk to the proponent who managed as well to have a very difficult construction project for Coastal GasLink, the barriers put in the way probably added billions of dollars of additional cost to that as well, which is why I welcome a 2-year to yes window where we can streamline the permitting process, figure out the right way to do it, because if we had the private sector building, we would have had Keystone XL, we would have had Energy East, we would have had Northern Gateway, and Alberta would already be well on its way to doubling its production. Those 3 pipelines would have added 2.5 million barrels per day of additional egress. And if you look at today's pricing, that's $55 billion worth of revenue year after year, every year, 40% of which goes to governments, both provincial and federal. So I don't think that we should be complacent. I don't think we should say, oh, well, I guess it's good enough. I think that we all have demands on us as provinces. We have demands on our public services. We need to build schools and hospitals and infrastructure. And you need to have a source of revenue to do it. I know that those on the left side of the spectrum like to talk about how to spend money. Well, you can't spend it until you create it. And so let's create the wealth, and then we can talk about what our priorities are afterwards. But continuing on the way we have for the past 10 years, where growth is limited, is not in the interests of any of us.
Now, I would just point to the Prime Minister's aspirational comments around making policy decisions that would ensure that Canada can become an energy superpower and have the strongest economy in the G7. If we want to truly aspire to those two statements, and I think we can, then policies certainly do matter, and the policies are much larger than any single pipeline that might have to be built. That's why at Western Premiers, you saw myself, Premier Smith, Premier Eby, Canoe, as well as the Northern Premiers come forward with the port-to-port corridor concept, which I think is generational in what it can achieve for all Canadians, in particular those in the Western four provinces and the Northern Territories. That port-to-port corridor would really provide the opportunity for us to open up markets in Asia, open up additional capacity in Europe for all products. That we produce. And if we are going to achieve those aspirations of becoming the strongest economy in the G7 and becoming a global energy superpower, we're going to only do that by creating policies that are going to unleash the opportunity for investment to flow into all of the natural resources that we have in Canada, and that includes oil and gas, and getting it to market. So it's much larger than LNG or an oil pipeline on its own, and it's very beneficial, I think, to each and every Canadian, in particular in Western and Northern provinces and territories, but by extension, all Canadians.
Yep.
And by way of follow-up then, Premier Smith, you pointed to it in terms of what is all of this money useful for by way of building schools, building hospitals. This is a Lloydminster question, but it does concern both provinces because Lloydminster has contributed so much, particularly in the last 40 years, to the economies of both provinces. Lloydminster is in need of a new hospital. What will it take for the two premiers present in the two provinces to demonstrate the leadership to build that hospital?
I'll tell you the process we're going through in Alberta, because I know that it's a little bit different for Lloydminster. I believe the hospital system as well as the school system fall under Saskatchewan Authority, and then we have a cost-sharing arrangement for our percentage. I think we pay about 60% of the cost. So the approach we're doing in Alberta is we're trying to assess where the acute care beds are needed, because in fact what we found is that we need to have more home care, more long-term care, more mental health and addiction spaces, and those are the spaces that we're trying to build first, because we have many of our hospitals where patients who are alternative levels of care are actually in acute care beds. So that's the first step that we want to take, is get the patient in the right place, getting treated the right way, and then do a proper assessment of what our acute care needs would be. But I'll turn it over to the Premier to talk about Lloydminster in particular.
Right, and you know, across Saskatchewan, we've gone through much of the same process. As for, you know, the first time over the last 15 years or so, we're actually growing in population, and Lloydminster has been fortunate to be in that place of growth for you know, many decades now. But it is a shared city, much like we share Creighton and Flin Flon, of which we're trying to repatriate as soon as possible after some terrible forest fires, alongside and aligning with the province of Manitoba. Mayor Albers has been just a tremendous advocate on all things Lloydminster and the uniqueness, to some degree, of the community that does lie in two provinces. That's what I think, and he often refers to the Lloydminster Charter, and will often suggest some of the changes that he would like to see in that Lloydminster Charter. Policing, I think, as K Division comes out from Alberta, then we partake in that. Health comes from Saskatchewan, and then and education, I believe, as well, and then we share in the costing of that as well.
But bearing in mind that most of the residents live on the Alberta side,
which is where the cost-sharing formulas come into place, and the collaboration and the opportunities for meetings like this here today. What I would say is, over the last number of years, you're seeing a number of hospitals being built across Saskatchewan, over 25 different healthcare facilities in the last number of years. And so it is, we do have the ability to invest. I think both provinces do have the ability to invest in healthcare due to this relative strength of the economies that we have. And the conversations that we largely had here today is, let's make some policy decisions as a nation to further increase the opportunities for those economies to be even stronger into the future, contribute more not only to Canada, but contribute more back into the communities, just like Lloydminster. And so I don't have an answer on a Lloydminster hospital today, but I knew that I would say that we are constantly looking, and in the case of Lloydminster, alongside the province of Alberta, as to where our next investments are from a healthcare, acute care, hospital bed perspective, where they need to be located, what is the age of the infrastructure, and all of that is going through that process all of the time. And our health minister, just living down the road in North Battleford, I think we'd be more than happy to engage with any local healthcare foundations as well as the municipal government on, what the long-term planning for healthcare here in the province, including facilities, might look like.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll go to our next at the mic, and then we're going to jump to the phone for a few questions. Just a reminder to keep those questions short so we can get to as many people as possible. Go ahead.
Dan Gray, Meridian Source. I am looking into, we're talking about oil and energy today. 85 kilometers southeast of here, Rush Lake is leaking all over the place. A provincial response has been activated by Colleen Young. What can you give us as the latest information on this update that both provincial governments have at this moment?
So yeah, Rush Lake has had some issues with a leak there. I think it's confined to one area there now. They've been working on it. I had a conversation with Cenovus just a couple of days ago at the convention as well, and it looks like they're going to be able to contain that in the next number of days. Credit to Colleen Young, to Garth Roswell, who's adjacent to Colleen's riding, James Thorstenson to the northeast here as well. Been involved in coordinating with Cenovus, but also coordinating with not only emergency measures teams, but energy and resources in the province as well.
We work provincially with people when it comes to wildfires and taking care of wildfires. One of the things that keeps coming up locally now is we are hosting fire evacuees, even here in this facility. However, it's been brought to our attention that multiple water bombers have been grounded in Saskatchewan. Can I get a response for that?
Yeah, I understand the SPSA put out some further clarification at their presser that they held earlier today. There's a couple of water bombers that were waiting for parts. I think one was had to have maintenance after working so hard in a trying time. But then we did take delivery of one water bomber in the last couple of weeks, which is one of four that we had budgeted for. I believe started purchasing about 2 years ago. The first did come, and I think the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency has had some explanation as to why they didn't pull pilots off active duty with the water bombers that we have, so that they can go and actually train to meet NAV Canada's standards that are there. They did put a call out through their packs and the agreements that we have with other provinces and territories and states to see if there was some available pilots and crews to man that plane to get it up sooner rather than later. My understanding is, as per the SPSA, is that they were not available. I think they'd inquired with the military as well if they had qualified staff to be in that space as well. Where we are today, let me just say this. Thank you to all of the folks, whether they be volunteer fire departments, local leadership, those in the provincial Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency, those that are flying the planes that were doing their level best to protect not only northern communities, and we see this year after year in different parts of Canada and North America, not only protecting their own communities, but protecting northern communities, but protecting in many cases their own communities. Two of the homes that were lost in one of the communities were actually were pilots that were flying and protecting those northern communities. And so they're doing their level best, using all of the resources and assets that we have to keep, in this case, in this year, Saskatchewan communities safe. So thanks to all involved, and a special thank you to so many other provinces as well that leaned in with assets and human resources to help in a time of need. Other years, we've been able to provide those assets to other areas of Canada and North America. This year, we certainly, alongside Manitoba, and I think we had some rain in northern Alberta, which alleviated some issues there, but you had some fires going as well. We have a good process in North America with respect to our response, and we're so grateful that we have it.
Yeah. Thanks, Premier. We're going to take a couple questions from the phone here and then come back to the mic in the room. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
We have Ramid Mohammed from Post Media. Your line is open.
Hello, Premiers. I guess congratulations are in order to both of you for putting together successful summits in Saskatoon and Kananaskis. I wanted to start with one of the big stories coming out of the G7. That's that Canada and India have agreed to exchange high commissioners for the first time in several years. I wanted to get your reaction to this development, as well as your thoughts on the suitability and qualification of Premier Moe's predecessor, Brad Wall, to potentially be Canada's appointee as High Commissioner to India.
Well, I'd be supportive of that. I think that Saskatchewan has done some incredibly impressive work on expanding its footprint internationally through its trade offices, in particular India, which I know Premier Moe is going to be talking about, to the point where we have a presence in New Delhi. Of course, it's been abridged because of the tension over the last couple of years. But we also have presence in China. It has been under pressure in the last few years as well. Diplomacy means that you continue the relationship knowing that although you have bad patches from time to time, at some point you end up resolving your differences and you move forward. So I think that there's still differences and issues that have to be addressed, but I think it would be a positive step for us to begin having those conversations.
Yeah, I would also be a proponent for former Premier Brad Wall to be not only the High Commissioner to India, but essentially the face and the voice for many of Canada's foreign relations. We'll see what his answer is to that. But I would say the reason and why I would be a proponent of someone like the former Premier Brad Wall to be High Commissioner in India is because of the effort and the focus that he provided our province and our government under his tenure to those province-to-nation relations and province-to-industry relations in not just India but many countries around the world, which really speaks to the opportunity that we want to fulfill in this port-to-port concept, connecting Asian and European markets. Because we have been working hard as provinces to build relations not only with our largest trading partner, which is the United States of America, but with other markets around the world, which at times can be challenging. We see what has happened we've been part of tariff conversations in India in years gone by, currently are and have been in years gone by with China, as well as many other countries around the world. We have a strong trade relationship with India today from Saskatchewan's perspective, I would say more broadly from Western Canada's perspective. And I would just take the opportunity to commend Prime Minister Carney as well. For first inviting Prime Minister Modi to the G7 and then to sit down and to advance the trade relationship that Canada has with India. It's I believe our third largest trading partner as the province of Saskatchewan, been an important and ongoing trade partner for Saskatchewan for a number of years now. And so I would say thank you to Prime Minister Carney for what was by some will be viewed as a very bold action.
Wonderful. I mean, quick follow-up. There were a number of statements that came out of the G7, including a action plan for critical minerals. Are either of you disappointed that there wasn't a similar statement or similar language affirming the role of liquefied natural gas in both global energy security and reducing emissions from things like coal?
For my part, I would say that we're having a conversation in Canada which is very constructive about getting our resources to market. And when I look at the potential of developing out our port system and the critical minerals that will be going through them, I think the best opportunity is to have a good anchor tenant, and that anchor tenant is oil and gas, because oil and gas shows up in high volumes, day after day, year after year, 365 days a year. It allows for us to be able to create the activity at the port and justify the expansion of all of the roads to get there, whether it's a pipe or a road or a rail line. So to me, that is a good conversation to have. One of the reasons we've been focused so much on a bitumen pipeline going to the Northwest Coast, likely Prince Rupert, is because I think Prince Rupert offers us the best gateway to get to the Asian markets, 8 to 10 days. If we can build spur lines up into Whitehorse through the ring of the triangle, the Golden Triangle that BC wants to develop 6 or 7 mines, through to Hay River, all the way to the Ring of Fire in Ontario, then that becomes, I think, something that benefits every single province as well as territory. So I look at them as being complementary. I understand there's complications, of course, when you've got countries at the table who don't have natural resource wealth of their own. The conversations I have had with ambassadors is they are very aware of the peril that they are in when they have to rely on unreliable sources like heavy oil from Iran or gas from Russia. They would rather have a partner that they can rely on. And so that's why we're having a good conversation. The second part of that conversation, as Premier Moe has mentioned, is the corridor stretching all the way to Churchill. And I've been very pleased to see that Manitoba Premier, Wab Kinew, has said that, yes, there is room in his economic corridor for both oil and gas pipelines. And that would then also allow for us to get our product to our refineries on the east coast of Canada, but also onto Europe, where I think they are desperate to have a reliable provider. So I don't look at it necessarily as a slight. I think that the focus on critical minerals is obviously going to be very important to everyone, but they're complementary conversations.
And it is an all of the above conversation when it comes to global allied energy security, whether that be North American energy security or extending to other allies that may be a part of the G7 conversation. And that, I think, really speaks to the opportunity that we have as Canadians, and I would say specifically as Western Canadians, in really contributing greatly to the Prime Minister's aspirations of having that strongest economy in the G7 and Canada becoming a global energy superpower or provider of a global energy provider to allied nations around the world. What we need for that to happen is a slight alteration, as suggested by Premier Smith and myself, in the regulatory environment that we have, so that all of those projects can come on regardless of the product that they are producing, and to have the surety of that port-to-port corridor so that those markets can get to Tidewater, a Canadian port, and we are Canadian provinces, and so we do expect that we'll have access to those ports for the products that we are developing in our respective provinces. And so this is an opportunity that I would say is unlike any opportunity that I've seen in my lifetime for each of us as Canadians. And I'm very hopeful and excited on where this conversation will go in the next number of months.
Thank you. We'll take one more here from the phones and then come back to the mic in the room. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Next is from Rick Bell from Post Media. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, Premiers. I'd like to go back, if I could, to the topic du jour and just ask a couple of questions on that. The first one being, I assume you're both supporting, in some way, Bill C-5 that's being put through the House of Commons right now. If you're not, please feel free to correct me in your answer. But a couple of weeks ago, the federal conservative leader was making the point that with these bad laws you're talking about, how do you feel about the fact that somehow some of that wasn't incorporated into the bill? In other words, the bill is working around the bad rules, the bad laws, for certain projects that will be determined, and then they'll be able to get around some of this bad stuff. Why not put some intention of the bad stuff in the bill so that we see that the government of Canada wants to get rid of these things? Or at least, why doesn't Carney give you an indication? Pick up the phone and say, by the way, wait a couple weeks, wait a couple months. I promise you the emissions cap will be gone. I promise you this will be gone. I promise you you'll get most of what you want. Today, the only thing I heard was that the net zero electric vehicles is happening. So please tell me, both you premiers, wouldn't it have been better than instead of having a work around the bad stuff bill, you had a bill that actually got rid of some of the bad stuff?
I would say Bill C-5 is a necessary condition to jumpstart the investment in our country, but it's not going to be sufficient to change the investment climate overall in the long run. I think if I understand where the Prime Minister is attempting to go, is if he very soon is able to announce a project list that has 20 or more substantial projects on it that include mining projects and transmission projects and power projects and pipeline projects, I think that would send a pretty big message to the world about the direction that we're going. So I think that is, it's going to be necessary to do something of dramatic fashion after everything that has been done over the last 10 years to chase investment away and depress investment. So I'm prepared to walk down that pathway on that particular approach. However, when I say it's not sufficient, it would be an utter failure, as I mentioned before, if every project that had to be built in Canada had to be built with federal tax dollars because no private proponent is willing to come forward and do it. And the situation we find ourselves in today is that the approval processes and the 9 bad laws are also cumbersome, that we are not getting the interest in the private sector without making some substantial revisions or repeal of those laws. So yes, I would have liked to have seen a few. I think a couple of them would have been pretty easy to give a win to in this legislative session. That being said, if the Prime Minister is going down the path that I hope he is, it'll be a parallel process, and we will know in very short order. We will know in the fall session what kind of accommodations are going to be made here, or if any accommodations are going to be made at all, and that's when we'll judge it. But the table that we put together with the Prime Minister, Alberta and Canada, is aiming to go through these bit one by one, and we'll have more to say in a few months' time after we go through that process.
That's right. And I would just say, Rick, why much of what we have asked largely to be changed in the regulatory environment is not in that bill is much due to the complexity of the work that needs to happen on many of those fronts. Not all, but many of those fronts. So what Bill C-5 is, or the second half of Bill C-5, where they ask for the prioritizing of projects, what Bill C-5 is doing is essentially legislating through the current regulatory environment that makes it virtually impossible for large-scale nation-building projects to move ahead. And so I think by the very introduction and ultimate passing of Bill C-5, there is an admission that the regulatory process has to change. That work has to happen and has to, I think, ultimately show some significant signs in the way of legislation being repealed and introduced in the federal parliament as early as this fall, or as late, I would say, as this fall. So we need to fix the regulatory environment, and the very introduction and passing of Bill C-5, I think, is an admission that needs to happen. Some of the bills and pieces of legislation that are in place, like the emissions cap, like the tanker ban, like the gag order on oil industries, speaking about their sustainability situation, and in many cases they're the most sustainable oil-producing companies and industries on Earth, those can just be pitched overboard and repealed. But when it comes to, and they should be, when it comes to a very complex bill like the Environmental Impact Assessment Act, Bill C-69, there's a lot of work to do in that particular act to make it possible for a project to not require Bill C-5 to circumvent Bill C-69, but for Bill C-69 actually to provide the sustainable investment environment where industries and investments from around the world are looking at Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the rest of Canada for that investment to land, because they have a regulatory environment that will allow for a project to come from exploration through pre-development, development phases, and actually have a chance of getting into production and providing that product through a port-to-port corridor to Asian and European markets and the rest of the world. So that's the work that has to happen. We have months, not years, for that work to happen, to really unwind some of the challenging policies, and I say policies do matter, but to change and alter and unwind some of the policies that have been highly problematic for for our current aspiration of this Prime Minister, and I would say that I share it, for us to strengthen that economy to the top level of the G7 nations, and for us to really become an energy superpower.
Yeah.
Thank you. And do you have a follow-up?
And my supplementary question is, I think early on, I believe it was you, Premier Smith, but I'd like both of your opinions, of course, is you said something, I think the quote was, "Enough is enough." And maybe you could explain what that means. And why I'm asking that is because a few days ago in Calgary, Premier Scott Moe made comments that the audience loved, and subsequently when they were written about, there were masses of emails in support of his comments when he was talking about, let's just proceed, we've got to proceed with this stuff. If, in the case of Quebec, I'm tired of that conversation. If they want to get on board, come on board, but we're we have to push ahead on this. Massive public support from people in Saskatchewan and Alberta, at least the stuff that I read. So tie that into this whole idea that enough is enough on this, because there's been a lot of talk about this, and we're getting close to game time.
Yeah, well, the national self-sabotage that has happened over the last 10 years has to end. That's what I mean by enough is enough. We cannot keep on fighting against these kinds of nation-building projects, these revenue-generating projects, and then still have aspirations to add more and more social programs at the federal level. It doesn't make sense. If you want to support the expansion of social programs to help your people, you've got to generate wealth to tax in order to be able to do it. And I think that is probably maybe the West has gotten around to understanding that faster than some of our friends in the East, but that's okay. And we can work with a coalition of the willing of the Western provinces and territories, which seems to be solidifying. This is I think, the reason why the port-to-port concept has gotten such traction with the territorial and provincial leaders, is that we can all see how we can benefit from it. And we're trying to find ways to have our friends in Eastern Canada benefit too, but maybe they have to develop their own projects and their own ideas. Quebec has substantial natural gas resources, and they should develop their own pipelines for their own interests, to wean themselves off their reliance on gas from the United States. They should use it to develop their own royalty structure so they can develop their own revenue to pay for their own services for their own people, so that they don't have to rely on transfers that largely come from Western Canada to be able to do it. So that's, I think, an important national conversation for us to have. But I can tell you that I'm far more interested in working with the coalition of the willing, with those who already get it and already see how we can mutually help each other, rather than trying to push water up a hill. Let's just work with the projects that we know can be successful in short order, benefit us all, and then we can expand the conversation to those who are a little more slowly getting the picture. But I think everybody is coming around to understanding that being on Team Canada means these kinds of projects have to go ahead. We can't just keep saying no.
I would say it really describes a reaction to the gulf of where we are, as opposed to where the aspiration is for Canadians and us as Canadians to go. Where we are, we hear words being thrown out like Canada has a productivity challenge or a productivity problem. Canada's GDP per capita is growing at the slowest rate of any of the developed nations, essentially, in the world. And now we hear a new Prime Minister in an existing government that is making aspirations about Canada becoming a global energy superpower, and Canada having the top or strongest performing economy in the G7. And so the gulf between where we are and where we need to get to is simply a differential of policies. Policies really matter. And when you look at the policies that have been introduced federally over the last decade, and what they have done, or the impact, positive or negative, that they've had on the Canadian economy, or specifically the natural resource economy, largely based in Western Canada, versus the policies that have come from a government like the government of Alberta or the government of Saskatchewan, that have always been put in place, yes, to protect our environment and to include all people that can be included and involved in those investments, but have always been put in place with the eye to bringing that project, bringing that investment to our province, to our nation, for the betterment of all Canadians. And so what we hear in words from this new Prime Minister in the existing government are very good. And I would say they're strong statements that are being made. Over the next number of weeks and months, those statements are very quickly going to have to transition into actions. Actions in the way of repealing certain pieces of legislation, changing a number of regulations, and ultimately changing some significant pieces of legislation like the Environmental Impact Assessment Act.
Thank you. I know the Premiers will be running late for their next engagement. We just have time for a few more questions here, maybe one or two. We'll go to the mic first. Go ahead.
I'm Sarah Comadina with Global News. Just looking at this, and Scott Moe, you mentioned that we have the cleanest oil and gas industry in the world.
Right down the road here, about half.
Yes, but aren't some of these regulations what make it clean? And if cutting all of these out, like, how will you ensure that we maintain that status. I mean, it seems like the environment isn't really considered too much in these.
Well, I would say, I know you have a really strong story to tell, but I would say that the federal government was late to the party. In Alberta, we identified industrial carbon pricing in 2007, and we've been putting in structures through our tier program where we're able to invest in new technology. If a company is at the level of the average, then they don't pay into the fund. If they're below average, they have to pay into the fund. And then that fund goes to finance carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We've got 2 major projects now, sequestering at scale. 14 megatons have already been captured. We've mapped out all of our pore space, 25 different pore space options. We have other companies that are looking at doing more carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We have got Air Products net zero hydrogen. We have got Dow Chemical net zero petrochemical. Heidelberg is moving towards net zero cement. We have invested in hydrogen projects, I believe over 30. We've got bitumen beyond combustion projects. We have seeded the money for geothermal. Ever has a major at-scale projects for geothermal starting in Germany and also elsewhere. And E3 is going to open up a brand new field of lithium production, which is valued somewhere around $500 billion in our province with brine-hosted minerals. And there's others, vanadium and so on and so forth. So that didn't happen because of the federal government. That happened because of the actions of the provincial government. We made choices that we wanted to be able to diversify our economy. And what we were doing is leveraging the wealth of the traditional industries to be able to pay for those new sources. What the federal government has been trying to do is shut off the taps. If you put in an aggressive emissions cap that allows all of that wealth to be shut in, then you have less money to be able to invest in those new green technologies. And if you have a punitive regulatory approach to natural gas electricity production, you're not going to be able to develop an AI data center space in our province. And in addition to that, you're going to end up impacting emissions to the negative, because if we don't export our clean LNG to displace higher polluting fuels, then that's going to increase emissions as other countries end up opting for coal or wood or dung. So I would say that the paradigm that the federal government has been in has created the exact opposite environment for success. And it was the initiatives of the premiers and the provincial levels of governments in bygone years that have got us to the point that we're on right now.
And I would agree with all of that and all of those initiatives. And I would just take this opportunity to invite each of the news outlets back to the Lloydminster Oil and Gas Show, or any oil and gas show for that matter, and go around and speak to some of the displays and the owners of companies that are servicing the oil and gas industry. And take note of how markedly the focus of those displays and those booths and those owners of those industries have changed over the last 10 to 15 years. It's essentially an environmental show when you come, and all of it is around a lower impact on the environment, lower impact on from a carbon perspective for all that we're doing in this industry. And I would say, very proudly, I see that centered very much here in the provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta, and you can see it all at the Lloydminster Oil and Gas Show this summer. The choice that we have to make, and the one-size-fits-all that often comes from the federal government, is going to land us in the latter of the two choices that we have. So the first is to work alongside the industries that are creating wealth in our communities, developing natural resources, whether it be mined products or producing oil and gas, and doing so in a way that will continue to drive down emissions and ensure that we are producing some of the most sustainable product on earth, of which we are. And I'll close with that story. When you have a one-size-fits-all across the nation that doesn't recognize the nuances and opportunities that industry has to reduce emissions maybe in a slightly different way, what you do is you shut in production. And this is what has happened across broadly the European Union, causing the European Union to largely be dependent. A few years ago, they realized they were dependent for about 30% of their natural gas or oil and their coal on Russia, which is, I would say, put the European Union at that point in time in a very vulnerable position. And we should never do that, not only in Saskatchewan and Alberta, but Canada or North America for that matter. Energy security does mean general security, and we want to be a part of that, not only on a continental basis, but with our allies around the world. Just down the road here, you'll see a number of companies that have invested in what is called thermal oil production, drastically changing how oil is produced right here in the heavy crude oil producing area of western Saskatchewan and eastern Alberta. The industry in this area, in this region, has reduced their methane emissions by some 65% relative to 2015. I have challenged everyone at every time that I have had the opportunity to speak of this is find me another industry that has reduced their methane emissions by 65% since 2015, and have yet to find another industry with that type of an environmental record. The investments, environmental investments that are happening in Fort McMurray and north in the oil sands are unlike any other investments being made globally. And I would just invite once again all Canadians, and in particular our federal government and our Prime Minister, to be very proud of all of the products that we produce, and not just because of what we produce, but because of how we produce them, and work alongside the provinces and the industry to create opportunities to make more of those products available to the world.
Mm-hmm. And you actually have a greater carbon capture story than we do. You're ahead of us.
Yeah, we have some down in the Weyburn, Midale area. We have some net zero oil companies that are operating there on a net zero basis today. We brought numerous of all of these oil companies to COP28 to tell their story to the world on just how we are producing oil here in Saskatchewan. And listen, it's oil and gas are a product that some would like to think are going to phase out. They're not. We're going to use at least as much, likely more, in the years ahead. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that we as global citizens should be very careful in choosing the product that we are purchasing, and purchase the cleanest product that you can find, which often you will find is being produced right here in Western Canada. And I say that very selfishly from a Saskatchewan's perspective, whether it's oil and gas, potash, agri-food products, the uranium, which we know is used for carbon-free nuclear power. We're very proud to contribute in the way that we do, not only to energy security across our nation and our continent, and to our allied nations around the world, but we're also very proud in ethically how we produce the products that we do, but from a sustainability perspective, how we produce them as well.
And I just wanted to clarify, I do have a follow-up, but I just wanted to say, so is this
will
a promise?
Just be the last question, so if you want
okay, well, I just want a quick yes or no. Is this a promise that you're going to continue with being environmentally conscious moving forward? I just yes or no?
Well, yes. I mean, we did end up freezing our carbon tax on industrial emissions only because it's so much higher than what you see in Quebec. Quebec's carbon price averaged $41 per ton last year. We're at 95. The federal government wanted to go to 170, and we heard that by 2030, that would just be crippling to the industry. So we want to keep it at 95.
And with Bill C-5 and Indigenous leaders speaking out that they're upset with how this is going, they're feeling like they're not consulted. If this does move forward, will you also make a promise to Indigenous leaders that you'll include them in this and work with them to move forward in these projects? Because I feel like right now they're feeling left out in these decisions.
I would say that Alberta's been a leader in this. We created the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation with $1 billion loan guarantee. It was a suggestion from Chief Willie Littlechild, who acknowledged that one of the challenges that nations have is if you don't own property in fee simple, it becomes hard to pledge that when you're trying to take on a position of debt in a company. And so we're providing that loan guarantee. We now have $750 million worth of projects that we've underwritten, that will generate $1.2 billion worth of revenue for the 43 nations that are involved. We've got several other projects that we want to consider. We've expanded it to tourism, healthcare, agriculture, and others. And we ended up increasing the amount of our loan guarantee to $3 billion to be able to accommodate that. We were pleased to see that the federal government followed suit in their most recent budget. They've increased it now, I believe, to $10 billion of a loan guarantee. But we always knew, especially for linear projects, that go across multiple territories and impact territorial rights and treaty rights for many nations. The only way we're going to get those built in the future, whether it's a transmission line or whether it's a pipeline, is to have an Indigenous ownership stake. And so we're prepared to underwrite that and make it happen. And I've seen that the federal government is too.
And I would just say future behavior most certainly is likely indicative of what past behavior has been. Premier Smith is right. The province of Alberta did lead when it comes to underwriting the opportunity and loans for Indigenous communities and entities to become involved directly in an ownership stake in not only small scale but large scale value added infrastructure projects. We moved very quickly in that space with the Saskatchewan Indigenous Finance Corporation as well. oil. And we've seen the federal government move into this space as well, mirroring what we're doing, which is a good thing. And when it comes to the sustainability of how we're producing our products, I shared some statistics on the oil being produced right here in this area of Canada, in and around the Lloydminster area. And I would just close with saying, if you're wondering what future behavior will look like, I think you can look to past behavior of these two provinces when it comes to sustainable production of the resources that we are producing and providing to the rest of the world, and also how we're doing so in an ethical way by including everyone in the success of those investments can bring.
Thank you. And that's going to be all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.